All right, welcome everybody to the How to Operationalize Snowflake Intelligence webinar. We will give a minute for everybody to get logged in, and then we will kick it off. While we're waiting, I'm going to put a link in the chat. If you would like to follow along either during the video or after when we share the recording, feel free to go to that link, register, and it'll provision you a Snowflake account. I'll share my screen just to show what it looks like. And since I do see some familiar faces, if you're already a DataOps customer, go ahead and use that sign in. Or if you have a Snowflake DataOps account already, use the link to sign in. If this is your first time, go ahead and put your email here and you should get an email to create your account, which takes just a minute. Again, I'm just going to give it a minute for everybody to get in. I'll put that link in the chat again in just a second. So if you've joined since I last put it in, here's that link again. It'll take you to this page here, which is where you can register for a Snowflake account and a DataOps account so that you can follow along as we go through this lab. This environment will stay alive for about a week after this. So if you just want to watch today and then follow along after, you can access this for the next week or so. Just make sure to save this URL to get back to it. Awesome. We're looking good, and I know we've got a lot to do, so I'm just going to do some quick introductions and then hand it over to Keith to run this lab. So my name is Jen Kindle. I am the Customer Success Team Lead here at DataOps.live. We've got Keith Belanger, who will be running the lab. He is our field CTO. And also on the call, if you have any questions, Mark Bartlow, our Principal Solution Engineer, and Doug Needham, our Principal Solution Architect. So if you are ready, Keith, I will hand it over to you.
Sounds good. I'm going to see if I can
audio
share
is bad, so hopefully your audio is better than mine.
Check one. Is my audio okay?
Sound good to me.
I'm going to try to share my screen here. Here we go. Can you see my screen? I'm going to take silence as a resounding yes. So hi, everybody. My name is Keith Belanger, Field CTO here at DataOps.live. As Jennifer mentioned, you should all have a link to register and get your own Snowflake account provisioned. For those of you who've never used DataOps.live, you should also get a DataOps.live account provisioned for yourselves as well. And we will get underway in the lab. During this lab, I am going to go consistently. I'm not going to pause. We have the rest of our team here that'll be participating in the chat and the Q&A. Post any questions that you might have there. What I'm going to do is start with, you should have a screen that looks like this after you've registered. Below, you have all of the information for getting to your provisioned Snowflake account. Everybody has their own, so nobody will be stepping on each other's toes. When you link into it, you will get to a clean, empty Snowflake account that we'll be using today. Also in this registration, you have something called lab instructions. So what I'm going to do is start. I'm just going to click on the lab instructions. Again, all of these are available to everybody. This is going to be step by step of everything I'm going to be going through today. Again, has all of the lab. Your account, so what we'll be showing here for you for Snowflake account will be yours specifically. What's here is for mine specifically as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're all going to have to start with something. We all have a blank DataOps.live account, and we all want to be working with the same thing. The intent today is not for us to build a Snowflake Intelligence, but for us to how to then provision it and maintain it in a DataOps manner. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to all kind of fork off a existing project in DataOps.live. What is a project in DataOps Live is Think of it as a wrapper of a bunch of stuff you would want to be doing together. If you're following, for example, medallion, it could be a bronze layer, a silver layer, a gold layer. Maybe you're only working for a certain domain or you're doing a certain mart. However, you and an organization want to version and manage code, you have the ability to create these projects. They can be nested, whatever, to do that work in. Everything within a project is all versioned in a Git-like repository. Here we have a project we're all going to fork off of. So we're going to do on the far right, upper right, we're going to click fork. To do that, we're all going to have our own namespace to put our fork into so that we all do not step on each other's toes. We're all going to make a copy of the same exact project and bring it into our very own space inside DataOps.live. Here you can see now I have under my space, Keith Belanger, our hands-on lab. Now that we forked it though, however, we have one critical important step that we all need to do. I can't emphasize enough that this is a critical step to do. We're going to go to settings, general, and what we need to do in the advanced is we need to break this fork relationship. The last thing we want to do is edit the code and break the master. So it's a very important step that we need to do is we need to remove that fork relationship. This is kind of our, are you really sure you want to do this? Yes, I want to do this. So now I'm here with my very own project within my DataOps.live account for me to work with. The next thing we need to do is we need to associate our DataOps.live account with each of our Snowflake account because we all were provisioned individual ones. You have to make that connection. And we're going to do that by going into settings, CI/CD, and we'll see here something called variables. I'm going to go back to the lab instructions, and I already went and did these steps. As I said, I'm going to go at a good pace, but on the first step one, if you scroll down, you're going to see a grid that says keys and values. These are the values you need to put into that configuration. This will automatically have been populated for what is needed for your specific Snowflake account. So this is not generic. It'll be specific to your registration. So I'm going to basically going back and forth between the two. I'm going to go into variables, hit expand. I'm going to add a variable, go to my first one, copy the key. This is riveting stuff, I know, but it is critical for an organization to make sure that you have information. Now, we're hard coding this within your organization. This would all be done within a key vault capability, but for here, for the lab, we're just hard coding it all. Again, just going to make sure I have all of these. I have mastered the Control C, Control V. And I've got one more. In total, you should have 5 variables that you're going to need to set. Now, looking at some of these, you're probably wondering what's the reason. Again, in DataOps.live, we are tightly integrated with Snowflake. So when we are doing the DataOps exercises and stuff, everything interacting with inside Snowflake is doing it under its specific ID and capabilities. And so, and we will see that once we go into Snowflake. So now we've created all of our variables and we're pretty well set to go. So what I'm going to do now is go to the repository. I'm just going to move to the steps. I've now moved on to step 2, which we're going to observe the initial production pipeline. So right now, what we're sitting with, all of us have a empty Snowflake account and we have our DataOps.live. Now, what we're representing here is we've already built Snowflake Intelligence. Within our repository, we're in the main branch. Within the main branch are all the code we need to populate Snowflake. All of our tables, views, semantic layers, everything that is needed to do Snowflake Intelligence successfully is in this repository. So what we want to do is we're going to run a pipeline and deploy this. And basically, we're going to create our production environment inside of Snowflake. So to do that, what we're going to do is go to CI/CD pipelines. And we're going to run a pipeline. A pipeline for us is the ability to run code, run processes, run tests, basically our orchestration capabilities through a pipeline. And here, since this is the first time we run this pipeline, we want to make sure our account knows that just run it in Snowflake. If you are in production, you might have stuff already there and you don't want it to overwrite. But in here, if to be safe, we're going to just tell it to did I miss the step? Hold on. I'm talking faster than right here. What I want to do is copy in the lifecycle reset. I'm going to set that here into the variable. I'm going to give it a 1. And like I said, I'm just telling our pipeline to just whatever I have in my code, put it into production. And we're now going to hit run the pipeline. We're now going to see that our pipeline is executed. What this is now doing is if I set up my variables correctly, it's going to connect to Snowflake, get all the files in the code that it has been put together, and start to deploy it into Snowflake. Right now, it's getting the files and the structures and stuff that it needs. It's then going to set up Snowflake. We're going to load the data. We're then going to do tests and then create our Snowflake Intelligence parts and pieces. So what's key here is part of DataOps as a practice, right, is making sure everything beside to deploy an object has been tested, has been audited, has everything that is needed for it to be a well-quality product put into production. Every one of these steps is audited and logged. So everything that is happening within DataOps.live is logged. Same thing here with the Snowflake setup. You can see everything that it's going to be doing inside Snowflake. And all of these steps and jobs are things that you can develop, you can build to do whatever is needed within inside your organization. These are pretty straightforward, but we have definitely seen some that are pretty complex. Once I see this completed inside Snowflake, we will then go into Snowflake and we should be able to see the contents that we're going to need for Snowflake now be in there. Just jump into the logs and see how it's going. You can see here it's running all of the code and what it's creating. Looks like it's pretty well successful. So there, Snowflake is set up. It's going to move on now to start loading data and testing it. But for now, I'm going to go into my Snowflake account. I'm actually going to go into the catalog, the Database Explorer. And since this is my first time using this account, it's going to give me all these like, hey, did you know Snowflake has? So as you can see here, we have in this exercise, we are going to be using a sales database. We've created our sales database. We have our services schema that we're using, and then all of the tables and the views that are going to be needed. Now, as you can see, there's some stuff for Snowflake Intelligence that does not yet exist. I'm just going to quickly look and see if customer actually has any data in it. If the data is loaded, and there it is. So we have our data. So if I go back into DataOps, see how far this has moved along. And we're now up to doing testing. So again, part of being really an important aspect of DataOps and data products that you're putting into Snowflake is testing those, right? So things like, hey, we expected these values. Did we get the valid values? Do we have everything we know? Especially when you're doing for something like Snowflake Intelligence, you won't want to expose that to your business, if you have problems with the data that's really critical important. So here, DataOps is automatically testing those results to make sure that we actually have what we want. It's saying, yes, it looks good. Let's do the Snowflake Intelligence infrastructure. Then it'll do the semantic view and then the actual Snowflake Intelligence agent as well. I'm going to move along here so you can see here back in the steps that we did the life cycle. And so what we're going to do now is we're somewhat exploring what's been provisioned inside Snowflake. Let's see how we're doing here. And I think we're pretty much doing the semantic view. And this should all finish up here relatively quickly. There it is. So now, oh, I got a little too anxious. So as you can see here, this is all happening real live right in front of you. So the semantic view is created and now the agent is created. So I'm going to just go in. We should now refresh our database. We should now see, hey, here's the semantic view. And then eventually the agent will say here. So if I see our semantic view, right, I can see all of the information from the semantic view, which is a very critical aspect for anybody who's used Snowflake Intelligence. That agent should be here any second. There it is. There's our agent. So we have our sales AI production. So now we have gone from an empty Snowflake account to now we have a production running Snowflake Intelligence that we available to us. So let's just go give Snowflake Intelligence a quick test to make sure it's working. So I'm going to go into AI ML, click on Snowflake Intelligence. Now it is going to ask you again to log in. So again, going back to the information that you were given at the very information, we're all have our user and then our snowfall password. Just gonna make sure it sees me. No. Retry this. Why is it today it wants a pin and I usually do my face. Try again. Look at my face. I don't want the pin. I don't know what my pin is. Oh, I think I know why. It's because my camera's being used. Hold on, I'm going to take myself off camera for a minute. And that was the reason why. I'm going to put myself back on camera. All right, so now that we're in Snowflake Intelligence, inside our lab instructions, we have a quick prompt. I'm just going to copy and paste that prompt. And just so that we can show that our Snowflake Intelligence, you can see here, Snowflake Intelligence is using the Sales AI Prod agent. And we can see here, make sure it works. So now we have a working production environment of Snowflake Intelligence. While this is running, I'm going to start jumping ahead to what we're going to do next. Now that we're seeing that production is running great, we're going to mimic a scenario where, oh no, our source system has brought us new data, and we want to get that new data integrated inside Snowflake Intelligence. However, our business is using Snowflake Intelligence, so we need to do this modification and changes without impacting production, but we need to make sure that we are getting this added as soon as possible for our business. So we can see here, Snowflake Intelligence seems to be working just fine in our production environment. And so I'm going to move back to our DataOps.live account. And I'm going to go back to the repository. And as I said, we are in the main branch. We are have a production version of all of our code. But hey, we need to take on this change. Our team is ready to go. What we're going to do now is we're going to create a new branch. And we're just going to call this branch Sprint 1. And we're going to spin that off of the main branch because, again, we want to update the code but not impact the existing production code. We're going to create this branch. And now we can see that we have a sprint one copy of this, of our code. Now, what DataOps.live does is it's going to automatically create an environment, a sandbox environment for us to work with it. So if I was to go back to our pipelines, we are now going to see that there is a new pipeline running, which is creating a Sprint 1 branch inside Snowflake. So what's very important for many organizations is the environment management. You might have many sprint teams, many working teams. Isn't it great to use the zero copy clone capabilities of Snowflake to give people a place to work without impacting production? And that's exactly what's happening here. If I was to go inside the pipeline, we'll see everything that's happening to bring this branch. Part of that setting up of Snowflake is going to be creating a brand new Snowflake database. So once the Snowflake setup Snowflake is done, we'll actually go in while it's doing the rest of it and take a look at the brand new database we have, which is not a physical copy of production, but a zero copy clone. And what's great about the zero copy clone, even if you do have sensitive data, that if you already have data policies and tags and you're doing all of that other to protect your data, and it's different for non-prod, that'll all take place as be retained as well. So it's a great feature of the zero copy clone, which I think is one of the most underrated features of Snowflake that I love, is the ability to do that. And DataOps.live leverages that very, very well. So here we can see setup Snowflake is done. So I'm going to go back into Snowflake and refresh. And what we will see now is we have a brand new database that says DataOps hands on. This is our project that we did Sprint 1. So in this database, we now have an exact um, schema, an exact copy of what's in our production environments because we have made no changes. So sales is production. And then we have, so again, sandbox database, our production database. We're ready to make our changes and not impact production. So let's go back here, see how our pipeline is going. Again, the pipelines, in this case, the pipelines run to around 3 to 5 minutes. While this is going on, I'll kind of do some other, give some other information to you guys. DataOps.live is used by some of the largest Snowflake customers out there to manage and deploy their data products. Live, everything we see here is leveraging Snowflake capabilities in the background. If you use Git integration, if you use um, the the database change management, and all the other specs of Snowflake, we've integrated and we've put all of those parts and pieces together on top of it here, and then it all works together to with Snowflake. Also, if you are using any third-party tools, you can also orchestrate them here. So maybe I'm using a Fivetran, or I'm using another tool, or Calibra, or other things to do aspects. All of that can be also coordinated into these pipelines here. So your whole end-to-end of what you need to be doing. In this case, if we had other parts, our pipeline would be taking care of those scenarios as well. So it's a great way. I know myself, before I discovered Live, I did a lot of, like many people do, stitching these tools together and trying to make them all work and then integrating it with Snowflake. Here it's all directly working with Snowflake. In fact, if any of you here are from Snowflake, many Snowflake folks as well are leveraging DataOps.live when they're doing demonstrations. So, it's even a product and solution that is leveraged by Snowflake themselves. And we're just waiting for the agent to be finished. So I'm going to go back into Snowflake. And now we should see that we have our data has been provisioned into our sandbox. So again, all of the data is there. And then if I refresh it, I'm just going to wait for the agent. And the agent, now you can see here, the agent has been called Sales AI Feature Branch Sprint 1, where in production, right, our agent was Sales AI Prod. So we have two versions of the agent. And if I go into Snowflake Intelligence, I'm just going to reopen Snowflake Intelligence up. And then we will just change it to be our feature branch agent. So instead of our production agent, and just make sure it runs. So again, we're just prompting the same question we did. Please tell me any total sales for the customer. And now we're just making sure that our feature branch version works. And so far, so good that it looks like it's working just fine. So great. We now have a zero copy clone sandbox environment of our production database that we're now our team's able to add the additional parts and pieces that we need. So while this is running, I'm just going to continue to move on. So I'm going to go back to our lab. I know I've gone through quite a bit of these steps. So we created the feature branch. We validated the Snowflake Intelligence is what we just did. And now we wanted to make our change. So as a developer, we're ready to go and make our change. I'm going to go back to my repository. I'm going to make sure that I'm clicked on the sprint one. This is the repository that we want to change. This is the branch we want to change. And I'm going to go over to the far right and I'm going to hit develop. Now, this is going to open up our developer workspace. This is where, as a developer, you would go to make your changes. You might want to do DBT work. You might want to do some SQL work and YAML work, whatever that might want to be to modify your existing environment. This is the workspace to do that. Now, it's going to take a moment or two for it to um, get itself ready. I'm going to zoom this a little bit so that you guys can see it a little bit better. So one thing to point out in the very lower left corner, it's telling me it's working with Sprint 1. We want to make sure we're working with Sprint 1 and not the main branch. And right there in the lower right, it's just telling us the environment is not configured. So I'm still waiting for it to configure our environment. And once it does so, we will be able to make our change. Now, our use case here is our source system has got a new column called C status that has data in it that we want to bring into our structures and get it inside Snowflake Intelligence. We can see here that the environment is done configured and I'm ready to go. Now, I'm going to actually introduce you to our friend Metis. So Metis is our DataOps AI, engine. Those of you who've used Coco, Metis is a good friend of Coco. So Metis and Coco like to play together. And what we're going to do today is we're actually going to open up. So here we see the stars called Metis, and we're going to bring up our prompt window. And so Metis is going to help us do the work. In the past, I would have had to go into YAML files and all this other stuff in SQL and do all this stuff on my own. So inside the workbook, in the lab, we've actually have a prompt here so that we can all make sure that we get what we want. So I'm going to just copy this prompt and I'm basically going to tell Metis that we want to get to the right screen. I'm just going to put it in the prompt window here. And I'm basically going to tell that add the column C status, and I'm telling it specifically which YAML file I want it to edit. This way I can be very sure what it goes and edits. And by the chance, I want to tell it use the varchar1 to do this, but I'm not telling it anything else. And we're going to execute this. Now, what we're going to see is Metis is going to think out loud. But over on the right-hand side, we're actually going to see it modify all of the files in the code needed for everything that needs to be done to modify our existing production environment. That's documentation. That is the all the code and anything else that might be associated to the tests and all that other stuff. It's going to go and modify that. We can kind of see what it's doing, and it can tell us that the task is completed. So now that we've created the new column in the code, we now need to make sure we populate it correctly. So I'm just going to go again into our next prompt, which is now we're going to tell it where to find the data to ingest with. In your scenario, you might, in a real scenario, you might have a new table, you might have a new thing. We have a file that has the data, so I'm just going to tell it where to go and get that data. So again, now Metis is going to read that and say, oh, I need to go and modify the code with inside our repository. And it's going to do that. One thing to note, you might see, you probably won't get it here, but along the way, is there are certain things that when we get to a point where we're interacting directly with Snowflake, Metis won't work autonomously. It's going to say, before I do this, here, you run the, you push the button, you tell me to do it. So now we can see here the task is completed. It's modified all the files needed to um, update that code. That could have been it could have been a DBT model, whatever it might be. Metis would have taken care of that. So now we've added a new column. We've added the data. Let me go back to the lab. And now what we want to do, we can see here in our use case, what we've done is we've identified that, hey, one of our columns that we loaded, we didn't have a test for. So what I'm going to ask Metis to do is to create a test for this existing column. So we're just going to, again, give it a command. Now, here I'm going to quickly mention we're leveraging a skill. We'll talk a little bit more about skills a little bit later, but a skill in this scenario is very specific that I want our AI agent to do. If you have certain things in your organization that you want to be specifically done a certain way, you'll do that in the skill. So we've developed the skill here for how we want to do our tests. And I'm just going to tell Metis to do this and use our skill. So Metis is going to read that. Now here, Metis is going to want to interact with Snowflake to get certain things. And so you're going to see, I want to run, it's going to ask me, can I do these certain things? And so I'm just going to, by default, if you're following along, you're just going to want to accept what Metis is asking. But in a real world scenario, you might sit there and say, no, I don't like that. Let's adjust the code and you can have that interaction. But I'm just going to run what Metis hears. Now, what Metis is doing is it's going and looking at the data because we want to make a test. It's going to go find out, well, what values are we seeing? Here it's finding those values. And it says, are these the values you want? And say, yes, this is going to be what we want. It's going to update the code so that we make sure that we have those values. And now that it knows the values, we're going to ask Metis to do one additional thing after that is we're actually going to make a test to make sure when the data is loading, it's checking for those values. Right now, we're identifying the values, we're updating our metadata, and we're getting those specific things. So now that we have that, I'm going to scroll down and we'll see that we have the validation test that we want. So again, we've not only created the new column and added the data, we're easily adding tests to our pipeline to make sure that our data is valid. So here, Metis it's going to look very similar to what was happening before. It's going to ask me do I want to do certain things? And say yes. And here, what it's going to do is, again, it's going to verify. You're going to see it's going to check again. I'm testing for these values. I'm going to check the database again and make sure I'm seeing the same values that you have in your code. And you can see here, yep, I have those same values that we had before. Let's make a test for that. Now it's great. If I was doing this all by hand manually, you could just imagine the amount of time this would be taken. So again, now the task is complete. Metis has made all of these changes. It's telling you in this row, we've done these basically 5 things in this session while we've been here. Let's go back to our lab. And I think the next thing that we're going to want to do is just commit these changes and deploy them. So I'm just going to tell Metis, let's commit these changes. Go back and just say, okay, great. Let's commit these changes and sync them with our repository. It's going to ask me to run certain Git commands. Again, it's not a full autonomous. So no, you push the button. So I'm going to write the code for you, but you push the button. So I'm like, okay, let's run that Git command. Again, what's great about this, I know personally myself, I'm not a Git expert. I could do this, but it would take me some time. So I'm just going to let it generate what it needs to do. And it's running. One more is the Git push. And the task is complete. And now we can see that all of the steps that were. So now, great, it's done. Let's head on back to our DataOps.live, and we're going to go over to our pipelines, and guess what we're going to see? A new pipeline is running, and we can now see as part of the sprint branch on this pipeline, it's adding the C status column. Again, Metis did all of this documentation and all of this for us. So if I go into that running pipeline. Once again, it is deploying all of this to our feature branch. So what it's doing is comparing the code we have, the updated code, to what's in our feature branch. It's going to identify that C status, right, is new. It's going to add that C status column. Then as part of the data load, we're going to add data to that new column that we have, and then create, you'll in within the tests, it'll run that new tests and all of that new stuff that we just built by using our AI agent. So I'm just going to let this run for a bit. I just want to get it to see the Snowflake setup. Again, this takes a few minutes. We also have, while this is going off to the lower right-hand corner, you see this. This is also part of our AI capabilities, which you can just ask it any questions about if you want to how to do something in DataOps, and you can have that fun interaction with our agent here. So it looks like the Snowflake setup is done. I am going to go back into our Snowflake account. I'm going to refresh it, and I'm going to be in our sandbox account. And now when I go to customer, I should see our new column, C status. Great. So we used our AI agent to modify all of our code, and it went in, updated that. Let's see if we have any data to preview under C status, and we do. So now our feature branch has the new column with the data and our production environment. If I quickly go back over to production, click on customer, go to data preview, we should see that there is no C status here. So from a business perspective, there's no C status in production, and it's still operating fine, and we're developing in our feature branch environment. I'm going to go back over to DataOps Live in our account and just want to see it finish the rest of the steps. Now in here for the tests, I'm not going to use a lot of time to go through, but if you go into yours and you go through the logs here, you will actually see where the tests were executed and that they were successfully done. But again, all of this, now if you think about this, if you're in a larger organization, you might have even wanted to add approvals, like I need to have my senior engineer or architect sign off on things. All of those things can be done as part of this deployment process and captured. Go back here. So right now, finishing off the rest of these steps. What I'm going to do is just kind of go back to my lab, get myself caught up. So right now we're observing the feature branch pipeline execute. That's all being done at the moment. And we're going to get ready to validate our changes inside of Snowflake. So we're eventually going to have a new prompt for Snowflake Intelligence. We're basically taking the same prompt as we had earlier, but we said break it out by C status. So once it's done the pipeline, we'll go in and test Snowflake Intelligence to see if it is now able to see our new data. Now, one thing you'll see here, tear down Snowflake. I'll briefly talk about this here while it's finishing. One thing about every feature branch you created, it's something you do not want to have there forever inside Snowflake. Can you imagine if you have many different sprints and many deployments, it could get very cluttering. Some organizations like, hey, let's keep it for a week. Let's keep it till the next sprint. So one of the things you could do is you can either do it from an automation perspective or manual. You could run this and this will completely tear down that feature branch zero copy clone environment inside Snowflake. So our agent is complete. I'm going to go back into Snowflake Intelligence. Yes, I know. We're still pointing at our feature branch agent, and I'm going to ask it a new prompt now is to look at C status. And so I'm just going to open up here the analyze. Oh no, you just saw here that our Snowflake Intelligence doesn't understand what C status is, right? It's not looking at the model, it's not seeing it. Why not? Oh, Why? We forgot to update the semantic layer. One thing very important about Snowflake Intelligence is that semantic layer, the critical importance of that semantic layer. And we did all that work, but we forgot to tell Metis to update our semantic layer. So Snowflake Intelligence does not know what to do. So we're going to go back to our Metis in our environment, and we're still in sprint one, and we're going to say, oh no, we need to go and fix our semantic layer. So again, we have a prompt in here that we're going to use to update that semantic layer. So I'm going to tell Metis here, again, we're using a skill and we're going to say update the semantic layer. We want to be very specific of what we want input and done in that semantic layer. So we created a skill for that. And then we're just going to tell Metis to execute on that. And so you'll start seeing it think out loud and start modifying the code on the right-hand side, leveraging the skill. Now, what we might also see is um, Metis is going to say, well, the last time you wanted me to commit and deployment, do you want me to do it again? And you can see here it's actually updating, finding out the metadata it needs to put into the semantic layer, and you'll actually see it updated to the right-hand side. It's adding that semantic and that information that it found inside the database about that specific column. Yeah, so here it's saying now that we've done, I'm going to go and update the Git repository. And push that over to Git. And now it's completed. So now when we go back over to our DataOps pipeline, let me go back to CI/CD. We will now see another pipeline running that is going to, you can see it here. It already Metis filled in the documentation saying it's updating the column in the semantic view. Now, I told you earlier about skills. You know, the person who wrote our skills is Mark, who's on this call. And Mark, if you could take a minute while
Yeah.
the pipeline is running to just give everybody an update about what skills are.
Yeah, well, without skills, you're given a broad context to your AI prompts, and it could go off and do a lot of activities that you might not want to do. Number one, it's going to talk cost you tokens, and everybody who's taken a dive into AI is realizing that token costs do matter at some point. So what you want to do, skills will allow you to not only provide domain expertise and automate some repeatable tasks or repeatable workflows you want to do, repeatable tool type calls you want to do, but also limit the context. You'll also condense that context to only do the activity without having to go and spend a lot of tokens. So think of it as domain expertise, more repeatable, specific tasks like this, updating the semantic view is a perfect one. Because when we were creating lab, when I was creating lab, I'm like, I want everybody to get really the same answer and update the same thing the same way. And a skill was perfect for that. And you and your organization will create skills that are very specific to your domains and your needs and your workflows. And skills are going to become very important to all agentic AI and the management and the creation. We're going to provide out of the box skills that let you operate DataOps live with specific skills on how to do the configurations, but you're going to also create your own. And they're going to be very important, at least for now in the AI world, at least for the next maybe 2 months or so, because everybody thought originally it was just MCP, Model Context Protocol. And that part of what Keith was showing there, the querying of Snowflake, we were doing with Model Context Protocols as little as maybe a month or two ago. And we thought back and he said, the Snow CLI with tool control from skills might be a better way to do it. And it turns out it is for us. So that's a little bit of why we use skills and what skills are good for here in DataOps Live.
Great. Thanks, Mark. And those of you who are using Cortex Code and Cocoa, you're able to build skills with inside Snowflake as well. And like we said, um, Cocoa and Metis are friends, and they don't our AI is not working against Snowflake's AI, but instead we're bringing the data ops capabilities um, to Snowflake, which is about how to do all of the Git management, the releases, the pipelines, the testing. So Cortex Code writes the code, or as I say, Coco writes the code, and Metis, deploys and manages the releasing of that code. So now we're waiting for the agent to be updated, and now it should, in just any second now, be updated. Well, while the agent is updating, I am going to go back quickly into Snowflake, and we should see now if I go, let me refresh this, and I go to the agent. Actually, I'm going to go to the semantic view, not the agent. And we'll see that in the semantic information, there was a seventh dimension. Now there's an eighth, right, for C status. So our semantic view was updated with the new additional column. Let me just see if that pipeline is finished here. And if so, great. Now we can go back into Snowflake Intelligence and we can ask it that same exact um, prompt. So I'm basically going to take that same prompt. Now, I wonder if it'll do it, because one thing about AI, those of you guys use, if we all took the same prompt, put it into Snowflake Intelligence, we might all get different results, and not from the actual numbers, but what it's telling us, how it tells us. And sometimes when I do this, it says, but I already told you there's no status, see status. And it's going to say, well, the last time, like the user is asking again, right? I find it kind of funny. The user's asking again, which doesn't exist. And it says, let me check again. And it says, oh, yeah, there it is, which I find, kind of quite humorous that it remembers that you asked, it told you it doesn't exist, but I'm going to check again. And then it is realizing, oh, it does. I'm going to generate now new SQL to execute and run. So now what we've actually seen is that we now have a working Snowflake Intelligence agent and our semantic layer and the data and the column all updated for the very new data that we're receiving from our source system. And here we're seeing Snowflake Intelligence provide us the insight using that information. And I'm just going to wait to get it through. So here we can see that now here is our customer sales by status and some graphs and some other stuff, which every time I've run this prompt, I get different things. And this is kind of really showing you again the importance of being specific. If you wanted a specific format, came back to tell Snowflake Intelligence that. Great. Now from our scenario, we've taken our business need of capturing this new data, updating our structures, updating Snowflake Intelligence. We have a working version in our non-prod. We are ready now to merge it into prod. I'm going to go back down to the lab. Some of these we've already done. And so we've already done the prompt again, and now we're ready to merge it into production. So I'm going to go back to DataOps Live. I'm going to go to our repository. Actually, I'm going to go to merge requests, and we're going to create a merge, right? So we're going to, take sprint one. We're going to create a merge request. And I'm just going to be real quick about, merge sprint one, because Metis, our friend here, is going to do much better documentation as we do the process to prod. So I'm just going to say, let's put sprint one into prod. I'm going to, at this point, uncheck the delete source branch because I don't want to get rid of the branch. We're going to create the merge request. Now you'll see here, we're going to create that request. Metis is going to join in. He's going to show us his little pretty face here. And he's going to actually document what he did from a development perspective into the merge. So now we have that as part of our merge. So any of you who are in any type of regulated industry and need to know what was happened, what was done, who did it, and all that other stuff, automatically being added into your merge request. Now that we have that, I am going to execute the merge. You'll see here that it's done the merge and a brand new pipeline is created. So if I go to CI/CD pipelines, you could also click on this, go directly to the pipeline, but just going through the navigation, CI/CD pipelines. And we now see that we are merging sprint 1 to the main. So we're taking what we did in our sprint, and we're now merging it to production. Let's go into here. Again, we'll watch this. So, bravo, everybody. We've watched this pipeline run about 4 or 5 times, and that's the one part that's the long part here in the lab is actually running the pipelines. But it's great seeing everything happening live and in front of you, so that it's just not talk, but it's actually action in front of you. So again, what this is doing, if I go back into Snowflake, is that we are taking now the version of the code that built this feature branch, and we're going to be updating our production database. So those of you, again, familiar with some of the stuff and capabilities besides Snowflake, right? That's some of the, create or alter and all of that stuff. It's all being executed. Now, one thing to note, everything inside DataOps, the is not actually DDL or SQL. Everything is stored in YAML, and that YAML is converted to the necessary code as it goes out. So if something was to change in the syntax or the way the code needs to be executed, there's that layer of separation from between what is in the YAML files and what is actually executed in the background. Now, again, everything is done, from a Snowflake perspective. As if I was to go into the query history, right, everything that is happening, right, is all here. So there's nothing hidden, nothing secret. All of the query history of everything that is being done is right here in front of you. Let's go see how the pipeline is doing. Okay, so the setup is done. So that should mean that now that back to Snowflake here, let's go to the catalog, the database explorer. Let's go to our sales database, service, and let's go to the table of customer. Let's look for our column and their C status. And let's look at our data and C status. So again, like I know in my experiences in working with Snowflake and many other databases is that many organizations have this overarching rule, like you can't go into Snowflake and just change it. Many people have that whole thing about infrastructure as code, much the same way you interact with your cloud providers. They have the same requirements in interacting with database. So there's not many many organizations that people can't just go into Snowsite and do these things directly. This is where we bring that kind of that experience people are used to with Terraforms and other DevOps capabilities, and we bring them into Snowflake in this DataOps perspective. So let's go see how our pipeline is doing. And I think need my little scroll bar here. So it's creating the agent. Let me just go back to here, get us caught up to speed, because what we're eventually going to want to do is we're going to validate that our Snowflake Intelligence. So again, we have our same prompt. Once the pipeline is done, we should be able to go into production. And there's our agent is set. Let me see, I'll go into Snowflake Intelligence, see if we can pick our production agent, which we are. There's our production agent. We're now going to execute our prompt for Snowflake Intelligence and see if our production agent now can find C status. And it looks like it has, because it didn't give us that same answer as before. Like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And so we can see here that the query results brought back, looking at C status. So Snowflake Intelligence has found the new column, writing the SQL, and then we will get our results. So with that, I know we're about 5 minutes left. Just to kind of recap what we've done, if I go back into now Snowflake, we have our um, feature branch account, our production. And if I go back to our semantic view in production, right, everything that we did in our feature branch is now in production. So we have done a full life cycle in under an hour, which was we added a new column, we populated that column. We also added a test on another column. We deployed that, we created our feature branch, we deployed that into our feature branch, we tested that, we found that we had an error because we forgot to hit our semantic layer, modified the semantic layer, deployed the update to the semantic layer, tested it again, worked fine. Then we merged it into prod, and now we have a working version in prod. And since we have 5 minutes left, I'm just going to kind of show you that we can now go to the pipelines of our pipelines. And I'm going to actually go to one of the sprint one, and I'm going to actually click on to tear it down and basically say, we don't need that um, anymore. And so we're going to let the job run to tear down our Snowflake infrastructure for the feature branch. And what that should basically mean is that now when I go into our production database and I refresh this, that eventually our hands-on lab um, zero copy clone environment is going to disappear and no longer exist. And all we will be left with is our production environment. I'll just keep hitting refresh and that happens. But in essence, that concludes our lab. Like I said, we will have a recording. This recording will be shared with everybody. You will have full access to the your environments for a week. Our team, I don't know, Jennifer, if you have shared yet an email address that people can use to reach out if they have any questions, or if you want a deeper dive into any of this with our team, you can reach out to that email address that we have. So let me refresh this one more time, and there it is. Our feature branch environment is gone, and we're back left to just what we have in production. With that, that's all I have. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Jennifer, but we're done.
Awesome. Yeah, so I just put the link, the email in the chat, but there'll also be a form you can fill out in the email that's going to go out after this. So it does look like there were a few questions put in the chat, and it looks like, Mark, you were answering them, but you could only talk to hosts and panelists. So
Yeah, let's
I'll
answer those. Yeah, let's answer all the ones that were pinged in the chat instead of the QA because some of these were very good questions that
yeah,
everybody would like to probably.
yeah, if we want to go through those, yeah,
Yeah,
we
so
can.
let
We've
me
got two
let me see
minutes.
if I could find the first one of the first one.
So
Let's
the
see.
first one is
Okay,
will
will
integrations at
integration.
the, yeah.
Yeah, and we could ping in the chat. Well, actually, we can't. But if you go to the DataOps Live documentation and look at SOL configurations, yeah, all levels, account level, database, and grants, we handle RBAC and configurations for all of those. Yeah, everyone that's available. And if we can't do it yet, meaning Snowflake's running faster than we are, we could create hooks and do the SQL to do that. Let's see. So that's kind of the way I answer that. Let's see. Number one from Nitu, if we have semantic view in Snowflake, can we update it back to DataOps Live? Anything on the roles and governance? Is it ready to use via the website? I think, or just change it. So what you saw in the demo here in the lab here is, yeah, we updated it actually right in DataOps Live. So we took the SQL create statement and called that, and we took the YAML of the semantic view and we modified that. So if you want to go back and say, yes, I'm going to modify this in Snowflake and then paste that YAML into the SQL statement, yes, you could do that. Or you could do like we did at the lab, just update the appropriate YAML. And this is what skills, Metis skills are very good at doing because you could provide examples. And yes, you could apply any roles for governance you want on that semantic view. So let's see. Anything about tracking costs. So we could track any associated costs that Snowflake produces for sure. And on a roadmap that we can't commit to yet, yes, total cost of ownership, total cost of development, all of that's going to be part of the Metis Momentum platform. So yes, costs will be front and center, especially since everything you're seeing now with Metis and AI and what we're going to be doing with momentum, we'll be getting in that what you call that token path. So yeah, costs will be a part of it of everything, but again, can't commit to any dates on that yet. Let's see. Is there anything else we have here? So no, that was a forward-looking statement, and we won't be held to any. That's a safe harbor disclosure there.
All right, there was just one more put in the Q&A, which was, do the Snowflake native apps include full functionality? And yes, they do
Yeah,
provide
yeah,
access
yeah.
to the full platform. So again, if
Yes.
you have any further questions, feel free to respond to the email that's going to go out later today, or reach out to that email that I put in the chat, and we will get back to you, and we can schedule a call or a demo or whatever is appropriate. Awesome. So I think we're at time, 1 minute over, so that's pretty good. Hope everybody has a great day. And again, look for that recording and that email that's going to go out later today. Take care.